Hi, welcome back to the second part of Cambridge Inside Out. I'm Judy Nathans.
And I'm Robert Winters.
And we're going to continue our discussion on what happened at the Envision meetings, and particularly housing, which I think is really...
Yeah.
You were talking about LLCs and how people are buying up property and not...
It was I think one of the participants at the Saturday meeting of this Envision Cambridge group asked, I thought it was an interesting question. Asked the person who was essentially in charge of the whole meeting, says, "What have you learned today?" So
wow.
he listed a few things, and one of the things that he said he learned today, which was actually one of the things I brought up at the table because I was at his table, which was the one about who's basically doing the speculation in housing in Cambridge. Not just housing, but just property ownership in general. There's LLCs, limited liability corporations, some of which are just like, it's just a nicer vehicle for owning property.
Yeah.
But they're not obliged to show who the investors are.
They're not.
They're shielded.
You can't see. Well, that's probably true. That's why you do incorporate, right? You don't always have to see who owns
Right, but there's some places where you still
Really?
have to disclose things, but oftentimes it's only if there's some sort of legal proceedings where you're actually obliged to do some of the disclosure.
I see.
But it's to me, it's not really a fair market if you've got ordinary people like you and me. Let's say we were interested in buying a house in Cambridge, and then meanwhile there's an investor from Singapore
who has cash,
who has he's got $1 billion in stocks in a Chinese stock market that he thinks is about to go bust. So he says, "Where can I move my money?"
Yeah.
So he finds various fronts, around in places like New York City or San Francisco or Cambridge or Boston.
Yeah. And we're talking money. We're not talking just
money that is so,
mortgages. We're talking outright buying. Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
So they'll just so somebody might build a building with 30 condos in it, and then somebody comes by and says, "I'll take 30 of those, thanks."
Yep.
And pays more than an ordinary person ever would, because it's still safer and a better investment.
So they'll buy the whole building after it's developed, or buy every condo?
That. Yeah.
They won't develop it then, necessarily.
I think for the most part, they're not developers. They tend to be the ones who then just buy them. But
they're speculating, or or they're buying finished.
So there are some, I won't name names of these particular entities, but there are some who have been buying some properties on Harding Street and Columbia Street and whatever, and one very close to my house.
Foreign investors?
Who you say to yourself, well, I don't know how this family could ever have as much money as they can to drop $3 million on this and $4 million on that and $10 million on this. It doesn't add up right. So there must be some other source of the money. And it's really, I think it's really...
Well, they're not a family, number one.
Well, the front may be a family, but...
They use fronts?
Yeah.
I'm so naive.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't want to go say too much here.
Okay.
But the thing is that, you would like to think...
straws.
I would love to have an actual market, market forces in play here. It's another thing I brought up at the housing table was that I don't want to have it be a situation where the only way you can afford to live in Cambridge is if you're extremely wealthy, or if you fill out a form with the city because you can only get it through some sort of publicly subsidized
or even like
arrangement.
The affordable, the moderate, which is pretty high, some of it, you still have to fill out a lot of forms.
You've got to fill out a lot of forms, but when I came here, or when you came here, when you wanted to find affordable housing, you looked for an apartment.
It was rent control. So.
Well, it was rent control, but whether there was or wasn't, before there was rent control, you just looked for an apartment. The difficulty
times have changed, Robert.
Times have changed now because you went through decades of where there was no housing being developed in the region, and it was a very limited supply, and so now...
I think there's I don't know, it gets into a broader discussion of money and where it's... This whole thing that, this is not Cambridge, but this revelation about this Panama thing with the shell companies. It's going to involve like thousands and thousands of well-known people. That's the problem right there.
We're talking real money. Yeah.
Real money that's offshore assets. Just like you're saying, we don't know who owns these.
I'd like to know whether or not that's a real factor in what's going on in Cambridge. speculation.
Well, but it's all part of the same problem, I guess is what I'm saying. And it's not just happening in Cambridge, it's happening in every desirable city.
I would actually say that real estate in many places, you know, certainly in cities
Desirable
where there
cities,
are
where
universities and there's pretty much a
biotech and high tech, you know,
Right.
all of that. Yeah,
I mean,
right.
you know, Florida real estate all went bust.
Yeah.
But the thing is, in a place like Cambridge, it's not going to go bust ever. So,
Right.
So if you got money, you're going to find a way to buy what you can here, even if you got to do it through others.
Seattle, San Francisco.
Yeah. So I think it's a real issue.
It's I mean,
you know,
I'm not a Bernie supporter, but I mean, he does stress these issues about
Yeah, but I think a lot of people do.
No, I know it is. There's definitely, it's becoming, you know, on that Envision form it had, you know, just write down without thinking things about Cambridge, and I wrote rich and poor.
Right.
You know, it's
But you know, the thing is what's lacking is just the opportunities for the people in the middle, because there are still a lot of people.
Opportunities for what? Housing or
housing,
for
housing? Yeah.
Well, I know. Well, how do you answer that? See,
well,
that's
the private market is what is always and will always be the real way that's solved. But you know, you have a situation where, like a person like me, I bought my triple decker back in '85.
You're house rich and cash.
Right, but I bought it because by owning a triple decker and renting 2 apartments, I could afford to live it. So for me, it was a strategy for affordable housing.
Yes, and people that do continue to use their units as rentals and not convert them are actually, they did smart things.
They did smart things. And so I can provide affordable housing to myself and to others with whom I live, and I can provide housing to my tenants.
But that's also your psychological, sociological makeup too.
Agree, but I'm reminded of one thing at one person I know up on Ellery Street who said, who has a multi-unit building, who was somewhat resentful when when plans were announced that Harvard was building some student housing across the river alongside Western Avenue. This is some years ago. It's actually been built. So this person was actually upset about that because, my gosh, if Harvard builds this housing for students, I'm going to have to renegotiate my leases and charge less rent. And she didn't like that. And I thought to myself, well, good.
Well, that's interesting.
See, I mean, so there, you know, people like to dismiss the idea that if you do provide housing opportunities, even if it's on the other side of the river or very nearby, just providing the housing, and giving people some options makes it much more difficult for Cambridge property owners to overcharge in their rents.
Right, but
I've been saying for years, and I said it at the Saturday Forum, I said one of the most beneficial things that could happen for maintaining affordability in Cambridge would be a lot of housing development in Union Square, Somerville. Because then some landlord in my neighborhood says, well, we want $4,000 for this sneaky little apartment. Person says, well, I think I can do better over in Union Square, and it's just a little walk away.
Except that is now being speculated in because of the Green Line wish, and that's going to be buildings like they have in North Cambridge.
But you know, there's an article in the Boston Globe today. It was basically saying that they're starting to see that this was the year where rents in Boston
I didn't finish reading that. I saw.
They're not accelerating anymore. They're actually starting
but if they stay where they are, it's pretty still.
Well, what'll happen is slowly inflation will catch up, and maybe then it'll be considered affordable again. Right, but there's a lot of forces at play here. So anyway, I did enjoy the Envision Cambridge meeting.
Good.
And learned a few things. I'm hopeful that this can be a productive conversation as opposed to what I always fear is people who are saying, build more, higher, denser, and then the people saying build nothing, and they, metaphorically, I imagine them all standing on opposite walls of the room shouting at each other. And I said, well, that's not going to be any fun at all.
Right. No. I think that I think I sent this... I had a question on their, they asked for, demographics if you wanted to provide them, like where do you live, where do you work, what's your household income, and I realized after I left, I went back in, they didn't ask, are you a renter or an owner, which I think would have been an incredible amount of information for them.
I think that's one of those situations where the consultants, when they come in, they've done processes like this presumably in other places, and maybe that's wasn't as relevant a question in other places as it is
Yeah,
here.
but it certainly is here, and
It very
especially
much
with
is
the,
here.
because like, first of all, I'm retired kind of, so I don't really work anywhere, so I didn't even answer that, but I could have answered, and maybe you can guess by household income, but you really can't, because it could be someone like you that maybe you don't make a whole lot on paper, but you own your home.
Right.
You know, and then there's other people that are renters that maybe have a high, you know, who knows? I just.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It would also show you what is the transient nature of the community. Because I
Right.
think, my guess is that most people were longtime residents that came to this,
Yeah,
and especially owners.
And there's the dilemma again.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. They have got to.
It's very
reach out
usually
to
very
other
predictable who
communities.
comes out. Well, they actually are. They have these street teams that have been going out on
That's good.
streets and the
Okay.
library, and they're doing what they can. I don't
Right.
think it'll ever be enough, but you just
No.
you do what you can.
Because let's face it, the people that show up to voice their opinions are the people that, I mean, it could be the same, but it's the ones that care about it.
Yeah.
And the rest,
Yeah.
maybe it's not that they don't care, just it's not
Yeah.
a priority.
I was actually surprised that there weren't that many people flooding to the tables for economics or economic.
You know, on mine
matters.
too, it didn't get, that's why it was one of the half things. It didn't get, it was like job creation or
Right.
just.
See, now, if this was a planning a study
Yeah.
going on in many other places in this
Yeah.
country and in this state, there would be people saying, "What are we going to do to create jobs for our residents?"
But we actually had pretty good discussions on that.
Yeah.
Nadeem Mazen was at my table,
Well, I mean,
and
he
he
was sort
talked
of-
about that too.
I mean, that whole STEAM STEM initiative
Yeah.
that he and Dennis Benzan were involved in certainly was specific to that. But I
Yes.
do find it interesting that in a place like Cambridge, it's not the activists, for the most part, are not there trying to create jobs for people of various economic strata. That was why it was sort of nice having Dennis Benzan voice on the
Yes.
council the last 2 years, because that was
Yeah.
like a big priority for
Well,
him.
Nadeem also, I have
To
to
some
say,
degree,
he was,
yeah. Yeah.
But what about the corporations? Are they, I mean, I didn't really have the answer to it, and some people didn't know the answer, the consultants didn't. Are they involved in training type programs, apprenticeship type programs?
Some are, but it is somewhat limited. If you are
Yeah.
a pharmaceutical company, many of the employees you have are going to be people who are, people with doctorates in bio,
Right.
this, that, and the other thing.
But there's other kinds of
And there are certainly some jobs, and one would hope that they would
labs, I mean,
get a lot of local people, as many as possible.
so I guess but that would be up to which departments in the city.
Community Development Department and Economic Development Division probably would be
Yeah.
ones who would be working with them as
Workforce
much
and
as
all that.
possible.
Yeah.
You do what you can.
Yeah.
And, as long as, I think as companies, I mean, we used to be companies like Stride Right that was in Kendall Square years ago.
Oh my gosh, I
And,
forgot about that.
and others. Polaroid were here. They were huge
Well, they were
community
kinda like-
partners.
Well, they were more like factories. They provided jobs for
Right.
people that didn't necessarily have a college education.
But they also had strong local connections. I mean,
Yes,
Polaroid
that's a
was,
good point.
founded by people
Absolutely,
who,
you're right.
lived in Cambridge,
You're
and
right.
so there was much more of a commitment. If you have, I have no issues with, Millennium Takeda or Novartis, whatever. But the thing is, they don't have as strong a connection.
Because they're
locally.
global companies.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So how do you foster that? How do you develop those
Candy.
connections?
Yeah.
I mean, the more you
that's a
can,
good
the more
point.
I don't think if people are thinking that there's going to be some magic bullet that's going to
But
solve this dilemma.
you're absolutely hitting on the problem, really, is the connections. It's like, and it goes back to what people complaining about neighborhood, not having neighborhood. It's the same idea, is that if you're having people coming in from all over the world or working, they're not what connects them to their community? And are not sending their kids to schools. Maybe they don't have kids to go to the schools. Schools and libraries used to be the,
but this is like the way culture develops, is that if
Yes.
you've got companies that are here for
Long
5
enough.
or 10
Yes.
or 15 or more years, and a company is not just some something, it's actually
Yeah.
people.
So do we
And-
have any companies like that right now in Cambridge?
I'm sure we do. I mean, I'd have to
Yeah.
sort of, I don't want to sort of say yes or no for some
Right.
in
We used
particular.
to have Bolt, Barak, and Newman. That
Yeah,
comes to my
oh, yeah.
mind, but I think they're gone. Are they gone?
Yeah.
They're
Oh,
broken up?
BBN, I think maybe still. Actually, I don't know about that. I should know, but I don't
Yeah.
remember. But the thing is that there are people who work here, and Cambridge is a desirable place. So over time, what you'll find is that more of the people who are working at these companies, and including people who are in positions of authority in these companies, will have lived here, and maybe at some point their kids are going to Cambridge schools, and they start feeling a little more invested, and it's something that
you know
develops.
what? We're also, I'm maybe not mentioning, we have MIT and Harvard, and that actually, I mean, they're kind of corporations, but they've been here a long time. They're not moving anywhere, and they do a lot for the community.
They do a lot for the community,
so
and as individuals.
that is actually
I work at MIT,
That's
and
right.
there's an enormous number of people who I
couple
meet
of
and talk
our
with.
city councilors come from.
Yeah, but there are a lot of the people who work at MIT.
They're very involved.
Even not. Let's not just talk about what they do in their role as MIT employees, but just as individuals who live here.
That's right.
Are very active in things all around Cambridge.
So that's a very positive side about our connect and the cultural events that they provide. And the opportunities.
Yeah. So really. I like to see some of these, some of this get cultivated. We need a little bit more.
It's funny. I don't know if that even came up though in our discussions.
Yeah, well, I
don't know what it would have come up under though. There was nothing on education. You know.
At mine, we had one school committee member who brought it up, but I don't.
But there wasn't a topic for it unless it fit under urban form or
I think that maybe
civic engagement.
But if people are drawn to something where they think about citywide planning, it's very possible. It's
probably not that.
They just don't think of that as a part of that process, even though it probably should be.
Yeah.
You know, it's just the way it is. So anyway, it was a good
that's all really
experience,
good, and then
they're continuing to do outreach. So keep an eye out, you know, and once again, the meetings of the advisories committees, those will all be public meetings, so people should come out to them.
And you'll post them on your site.
Absolutely will. You know, let me just say here, you know, as the author of the Cambridge Civic Journal, or primary author, I did this past Friday. I had my it's becoming like an annual April Fool's edition.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, this is something that I wanted to do for years.
Yeah.
And just always would say, oh darn, it's like March 31st, I forgot, and I didn't do it. So I think I did it first in 2013.
Yes, I think I remember that.
Did an April Fool's edition, which I try and post.
I don't remember what it was. Do you?
I actually have a copy of it. But I did things. It was like Bob Healy had announced his retirement, I think, and I had one of my lead articles was, you know, Healy reconsiders.
Gosh.
And
it could be believable.
But actually, that's the joy, because I did one in 2013, I did one in 2015, and then I did another one in 2016.
Yes.
And what I really like is when somebody said, "You really had me going there." I read through the first.
I was there.
I read through the first section, and I thought, you know, this might actually be true. Wait a minute.
Right. No cars.
Right. So and another thing I really enjoyed doing this time was taking things that are actual topics that are live topics happening today, and just twisting them.
Okay.
So, for example, I think it was 2 weeks ago, the City Council formally adopted the Vision Zero policy, whatever that really means, you know, but it was really about, you know, minimizing fatalities and, you know, zero fatalities, minimize traffic altercations, make things safer for everybody.
Oh, okay.
You know, sort of a pretty much universally acceptable concept,
so that's where that came from. I wasn't aware of that.
So anyway, I'll say here, these are two things that I found funny. So anyway, I put out as my April Fool's edition, it was Vision Zero, where it was the city announced its new policy to reduce the number of motor vehicles in Cambridge to zero by 2020, right? So there'd be a complete removal. And I think this says something about Cambridge that more than a few people said, did they really do that?
Can they really do that?
People thought it might be plausible.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the city council is a little outlandish sometimes. I don't know that they would quite go that far.
I could see them restricting them in an area.
Right. I think
not. This was like
at least one person
city,
said, "You really had me thinking that was for real," until I saw the thing about the fire department replacing their fire engines with horse-drawn carriages.
Right. That's right. I think that's when I realized it. Yeah.
So anyway, I had a little fun with that, and then it was funny because then over the weekend, right, like the day after, the city then issues the press release about their Vision Zero. I hope they weren't doing it just to sort of dissuade people to thinking, no, it's not what Robert said.
That's funny.
We weren't really trying to ban all cars. But the most funny thing of all was in the wake of this event that happened up at Harvard, where people got all worked up about the seal for the Harvard Law School.
Oh, yeah.
Which was really just a family crest of a family who endowed the Harvard Law School. But 100 years before they ever gave any money to Harvard.
Obama's relatives owned slaves, too.
Yeah, right.
You know that?
Well, we have to remove him from the presidency.
Yeah.
So anyway, so there were some people got worked up and they, lobbied the administration at Harvard and law school, and you really got to get rid of this crest and whatever. And they caved. Honestly, there was, in my view, there was nothing offensive about the seal. But, so people don't know how to respond to these things, so they caved, and so it's going to be changed. All right, so I thought, well, this will be fun, because I happen to know that the city seal of the city of Cambridge features a building called Gore Hall, which doesn't exist anymore. And I said, well, let me just go look and find some random facts about the Gore family. And I just found something which I spun into it and made it out as the controversial city seal is going to be changed.
Was this on your April Fool's?
It was on the April Fool's.
I didn't read that far.
Now, I have to say, so I was preparing to post this on Thursday night because, at 12:01 a.m. Friday morning, I was going to put up the April Fool's. Well, another thing I do Thursday nights, every Thursday night when there's a city council meeting coming up on the following Monday, is I download the agenda items for the upcoming city council meeting.
That's when it's ready by Thursday night.
And there I am about to basically post the information on a mock piece, a total fake, about changing the city seal because it's offensive. What do I see? But there's a real city council order in
on the state
calling
seal,
for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to change the Great Seal of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts because just in case it might be offensive to somebody.
But it wasn't just coming from Cambridge, though, was it?
There are some people who are just sort of pushing it around. It's true.
It's a state kind of initiative.
Yeah. I didn't know about that until Tim Judy talked about it.
I had to look at the seal closely to see what you have it on your site.
Well, I looked up. I looked up the background on the seal, and and honestly, there's nothing offensive
about it.
The
Indian looks okay to me. I guess you could quibble with the arm and
the symbolism basically has a Native American, I think an Algonquin tribesman,
holding a piece
a sword pointing downward, which is a gesture of having basically made truce. We have made peace with them.
But some people see it as probably surrender, because on top you have a Caucasian with a sword going up.
Right, but that's actually not a reference to the Native Americans at all.
I know it isn't. That's the point.
Right.
It's like the might has made you.
No, the reference of the broadsword is to the American fight for independence against Britain.
Right, but where it is,
it was a military seal that actually refers to securing liberty. How do you secure liberty? And if you must do it by the sword.
Subduing your enemies.
That's no connection between the tribesmen.
I know that, but I could see where people would say that.
I
think
but
that
I have to say
it should be left alone because it's part of history.
I absolutely think it should be left alone. But the thing is, it was to me, it was hysterical
that you were going to do that.
I made an April Fool's joke,
and you had no idea that this was going on.
I had no idea this was coming. So
life is stranger than fiction.
I refer to it as an April Fool's joke on an April Fool's joke.
Yes.
Yeah. Sometimes reality is an April Fool's joke on an April Fool's joke.
That's just amazing.
Yeah. So anyway, that was one thing. That's actually what brought out more people during the public comment part of the council meeting last night.
Were you there though?
I was there the whole meeting.
You never in front of the camera, right? You like to stay away from that.
I was on the fringe. I think after the public comment ended, I walked in.
Can I ask you about because when I turned it on, I did hear a lot about the seal and about Native Americans were testifying, I guess.
Yeah.
But when I looked at the list of people that were there was a lot about nuclear divestment.
Oh yeah,
like
that was the
names,
previous. That was the previous.
What was that? Oh,
there was.
meeting?
I think I actually misstated it. Vice Mayor McGovern pointed out that I had said there was an order in the previous council meeting calling on, specifically it said calling on the retirement board to divest of stock in companies that had any connection to companies involved with nuclear armaments.
So all those names that were in the
I said
agenda.
It was the city, but it was not city. It was the retirement.
Did those people actually appear, or did they just submit comments?
They probably submitted them, and they arrived too late, so they showed up at the next council packet.
So there were so they weren't necessarily speaking in front of people. No. But there were 32 names.
Those are just letters that got sent in.
I get it.
Email messages sent in.
All right. So that was that.
Another item that was it was actually brought up 2 weeks ago was this proposal for putting restrictions or regulating municipal lobbying.
Yeah.
which, you know, for 100 reasons that I won't go into now, I think is kind of pointless at the level of Cambridge.
At the level, because apparently it's going on a lot of places.
If city councilors were making decisions on locating huge industries in Cambridge but this isn't really how it works here.
So you're saying it's more the way we're structured is not as
we're
big
not
an
San
issue?
Francisco, we're not New York City.
Right, San Jose, where they have a lot of high tech, yeah.
Quite honestly, I really think, I mean, I won't state the names here, but I think there's a particular individual who's associated with a certain city councilor who's got a big bug about you know, certain people who make contributions who are involved, who are not disclosing the fact that they're actually associated with this, that, or the other thing.
But if they're a real lobbyist, that is known, right? They have to have, I mean.
No, not necessarily.
No,
I mean,
but they said,
if you're, let's just say you are a lawyer who is paid by a property owner to represent them in community processes where you are advocating for a zoning change.
So that's what you state when you appear, right? I am the lawyer I don't live in Cambridge, I'm not a resident. I am advocating for this organization or whatever that have an issue before the council. Is that what you're saying? They should state that. I mean,
I think for the most part people do.
But they
Everybody
do.
knows who they are and what, you know, what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they're kind of known commodities. I think
Right.
that this is really meant to be kind of a silencing device for certain sides. I mean,
They feel like some people are paid to speak for certain organizations, which I don't.
I have never seen that.
They're a lawyer, they're paid, but yeah.
If you're talking about people going up to a microphone at a public meeting or doing things because they're receiving cash for doing it, I haven't seen it.
No, not public comment. I think it's talking about testify or whatever.
Or giving testimony. I haven't seen it.
Yeah,
really
I don't
haven't
think
seen
it's
it.
as
So
big an issue
I think
as. But apparently, it's a movement going on in other. Boston is
the city
bigger than
council
we are.
referred it to government operations for discussion, and I think if anything comes out of that at all, it'll be highly edited.
Right.
So anyway, on that note, we were actually out of time.
Oh my goodness!
And I didn't think we had nearly enough to say. So
we have a lot to say.
See you next week.
Bye.